The Academy Award-winning writer, the man behind The West Wing, The Newsroom, and A Few Good Men, joins me right here in Studio Q.
It's great to be here.
Why did you say yes when you were offered the gig to write this movie?
You know, it was really a blind date. I had just had a great experience working with the group I did The Social Network with, and then Moneyball, and they came to me with the Steve Jobs book. And I said, sure, without knowing much at all about Steve Jobs, but he had just died a few weeks earlier. And I was kind of knocked out by the size of the mourning, the outpouring of eulogizing that was going on, and I wanted to catch up to that. But it was after spending a lot of time talking to people in his life, people very close to him who loved him, all of the people who were represented by characters in the movie and a few dozen others. Steve Wozniak, his one-time CEO, John Scully, and most particularly his eldest daughter, Lisa, with whom he had a very strained relationship.
Did common themes emerge when you talked to all these people that knew him so well?
Here's what started to emerge. Points of friction in his relationships with other people that I found very interesting and could all be traced back to a similar place. So before I knew what I wanted to do, I knew what I didn't want to do, and that was write a biopic, as you mentioned in your intro. I didn't want to do a cradle-to-grave story where you kind of land on the character's greatest hits along the way. I wanted to do something else. So this entire movie is just 3 scenes. Each of those scenes is in real time. Real time, of course, is when 40 minutes for you in the audience is the same as 40 minutes for the characters on screen. There are no time cuts. And each of the scenes takes place backstage in the moments leading up to one of Steve's product launches. And as far as fact versus fiction, Steve has in each of the 3 acts, in each of the 3 scenes, he has confrontations with these people, with Woz, with his daughter, with Scully, with Joanna Hoffman, with Andy Hertzfeld. And each confrontation gets heightened in the next act until it explodes in the final act and we reach some kind of resolution. Obviously, Steve Jobs did not have confrontations with the same 5 people 40 minutes before every product launch that he did. That's a writer's conceit, but the content of those confrontations is true. I didn't mess around with the facts there.
You said all these conflicts came from a similar place. That's what you discovered in your conversations. What was that place? It
comes from this place, that Steve had a particular kind of genius. He was able to infuse his products with things that we have an emotional attachment to the things that he made. We really like opening up the box when we get a new iPhone. We really like the click of the wheel on the old iPod, that kind of thing. And for reasons that are discussed in the film, Steve feels himself to be kind of irreparably damaged and unworthy of being liked or loved. But he was able to make these products that people loved and liked, and that was the reason for the huge outpouring of grief and sympathy when he died.
Steve Jobs' personality flaws are front and center in this film. What was it like putting yourself in his head or constructing that character?
It's really important when you're writing a character like this that it's important to me that I not judge them, that I like to write the character as if they're making their case to God why they should be allowed into heaven. So I have to be able to defend them. I have to be able to identify with them. And in order to do that, I have to find things about them that are like me. With Steve, that at first it wasn't easy, primarily because I'm the father of a daughter too. And Steve was not getting any Father of the Year awards early on in his daughter's life. It was tough for me to get past that, to really care about anything else once that was there. It's like, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, what'd you think of the play? That kind of thing. But then it was Lisa herself who helped me see my way through that. But I also found that there were other similarities, like, I live and die with the new products that I make, and those products in my case are movies, plays, television shows. My identity is very much wrapped up in them. I'm more. I feel like the better version of myself is on paper rather than what we're doing right now in person. I'd rather have people know me on paper, and I think that Steve would rather people know him from his products than from anything else. So I was able to find those things.
There are some scenes where Steve Jobs is not a kind man.
Mm-hmm.
How much did you worry about hurting anyone when you were making this film?
A lot. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Well, when you're making a movie about real people, and even though Steve is no longer alive, he has children who are. He has a widow who is. He's left behind friends and colleagues who care about him a lot. So you take the Hippocratic Oath and you say, first, do no harm. Even if something is true, you don't want to be unnecessarily cruel to him. And I don't think I was. I think that what the movie shows is a brilliant but complicated man. If the movie only showed, if the movie showed a brilliant man who was also flawless, he wouldn't be human.
There was a piece in the New York Times that was critical of the way you handled the relationship between Steve Jobs and his daughter, saying it was almost offensively in opposition to the truth. You had these long conversations with Lisa, Steve Jobs' daughter.
Yeah.
So how
do
you respond
to Joe
that?
Nocera's column in the New York Times? And I'm glad you brought that up. There have been some criticisms from Mrs. Jobs and from Tim Cook, the current CEO of Apple. They hadn't seen the film, so you have to put those in one box. And then the critics themselves, the critical response has been overwhelmingly positive, but nonetheless it has been unanimous. There have been critics who found problems with it, and I'm fine with that. I thought that Joe Nocera's column was absolutely nutty. He had two problems with the movie. The first was one you just said, that something was offensively in opposition to the truth. He was referring to the fact that in reality, Lisa had been living with Steve since she was 13 years old. Not only does this movie never suggest or imply otherwise, it states directly in the climactic scene, Steve and Lisa are having an argument, and Steve is making the case that I was a better parent than you're giving me credit for, and certainly a better parent than your mother, who you're defending right now. And he has this line: "You came to me when you were 13 years old, hysterical, begging me to let you live with me." Okay? Now, presumably he's not bringing that up because his answer was, no, you can't live with me. Okay? He's bringing it up as an example of, I've done everything you asked me to do. So I don't know where Joe Nocera got the idea that that was in opposition to the truth. And then the second problem Joe Nocera had was that apparently he interviewed Steve for about a week 27 years ago and noticed that he had a habit of saying that something was really, really neat. And not once in this movie did I have Steve Jobs say that something was really, really neat. Well, he's got me there. Not once in this movie did Steve Jobs eat a bowl of soup either, but chances are he did in his life. So I get that Joe Nocera did not enjoy himself at the movie, but the examples that he used, talk about being offensive. Joe Nocera is a brilliant political columnist, but he should read his own newspaper's film critic to get a better idea of what this movie is about. A.O. Scott will tell him what it's about in the New York Times.
I'm curious about your relationship with your daughter, which you brought up. How much did you see of her and Lisa?
I do. I have a daughter. She's 14 years old. She's growing up way too fast for me. But I think that the easiest thing in the world to do is for one father to empathize with another father. If you have a kid, I feel like I know you better than that we know each other. We're not strangers. Yeah, it was especially in the last scene where Steve does take a step toward being the kind of father that Lisa deserves. It was easy for me to substitute my own daughter in for Roxy. For Lisa. My daughter is Roxy, sorry.
I've heard you say that one of your touch points for dialogue is your family growing up, the sound of intelligent people.
Yeah.
What are your touch points for that sound, that musicality?
Well, yeah, it's a couple of things combined. First of all, as you said, I grew up in a great family. Everyone in my family is smarter than I am. Everyone in my circle of friends were smarter than I am. I think I was like their mascot, and I really enjoyed the sound of smart people trying to convince each other of something. The sound of, yeah, but have you thought of it this way? People playing devil's advocate, just for the heck of it. And then while that was going on, I grew up just outside of New York City, and my parents would take me to see plays all the time. And often I was too young to understand what was happening on stage. They'd like take me to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when I was 9 years old or something. But I loved the sound of dialogue. I loved the sound of these great actors and actresses, this fantastic language crashing into each other. It sounded like music to me, and I wanted to imitate that sound.
You've been drawn to characters like Steve Jobs before, characters I would describe as on the cusp of achieving something great. Mm-hmm. What is it about people like that, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, President Bartlett, that interests you as a writer?
Well, it's a couple of things. First of all, I'm knocked out by people who are really good at something. I like that. I like that in my personal life, and I like writing about it. I also, and this is more the case with say Bartlett than maybe Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs, but I like the quixotic theme of reaching high, even if you fail, reaching high. Nowadays, more than ever, we have begun to live in a world where civility has been downgraded. Several of the 7 deadly sins seem to have are like off the deadly sin chart, like vanity. And so I like the idea of reaching for the best in us, and I like, rather than dramatizing the difference between a good person, a bad person, dramatizing the difference between a good person and a great person, and that good person generally has to risk something, usually their own popularity, their own security, that kind of thing. To do what's right when nobody's looking.
That aspirational quality is in your stories as well. It's in the characters, but I feel like it's in the projects as well. You take on big topics. Mm-hmm. Where does that confidence come from?
You know what? I'm not sure confidence is the right word, because when I take them on, I'm scared to death, and I don't think I have ever finished anything, whether it was a movie, a play, or just an episode of television, without thinking I'm never going to write anything else. I know that I can't. It's like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the mountain, and then you're just always back at the bottom of the mountain. But I do like to swing big, and it means you're going to fail as much as you're going to succeed. But honestly, if you only succeed once, it's a good enough feeling to sort of get you through the rest.
Have you always been that way? You've always liked to swing big? Or do you remember a sort of moment where you realized that's the more meaningful project? That's what I need to do with my life. I need to swing big.
Yeah, no, I haven't always wanted to swing big. In fact, I've always, in high school, in college, you never want to, or at least I never wanted to take chances. I never wanted to look foolish in front of my friends. You're always afraid of being laughed at. That's magnified even more today with social media, which is entirely, it seems to me, entirely about mocking people who have fallen down from the safety of your anonymity. And it wasn't until I began writing, which I did when I was 20 or 21, when I first started writing for pleasure, when I first started writing dialogue, when I started writing my first play, where I didn't feel that sense of, let me just stick to my very narrow lane of what I think I can do well so that nobody will laugh at me, people will pat me on the back. And it wasn't a matter of confidence, it wasn't ego. It was, I just wanted to write what I liked. I kept my fingers crossed that enough other people would like it that I'd get to keep doing it.
You've said you're inspired by people swinging big even if they miss.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any particular favorite failures in literature or history that inspire you?
Other people's.
Other people's or your own?
Sure, I have plenty of my own. I'm not going to brag about my failures and tell you how much they've inspired me, but while I'm able to recognize, a commercial failure or a critical failure, for me, it's never felt like a failure. I've loved the people that I've worked with. I've been very proud of what's been on the screen or what's been on the stage. But
in history or literature that...
Yeah, I wish I could think of the right example, because I have to tell you, it was just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, where I saw something and said, God, that didn't work at all, but you really got to hand it to them. They went for it, they absolutely went for it. And I'm so sorry. I wish I could think of what it was, but I can't. I'm too intimidated by you.
One knock against your work is that it's quote unquote preachy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that criticism?
There may be some truth to that. I get it. The thing is, I like preachiness. Whether it's literally coming from a preacher, I like the goosebump experience. I like getting stirred up. The knock against Obama when he was running in 2008 was, well, big deal, he can give a really good speech. And I thought, oh man, that's a huge deal that he can give a really good speech. If you are a leader and you can inspire people and lift them up and get them to follow you, that is a quality I'm looking for in a president of the United States. So, yes, the things that I write, they're going to be speeches. They're going to be monologues. They're going to be duets and trios. They're going to be all the different kinds of music that you can find will be stuffed in there. And characters express strong opinions. Oftentimes, the conflict in the things that I'm writing, that intention and obstacle, oftentimes the conflict in the things that I'm writing are conflicts of ideas. And so somebody's going to have to convince somebody else of their idea, and it's going to sound like preaching. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but what can I do?
I only have time for one last question. Aaron, you brought up how hard it is, especially now, to swing big. Mm-hmm. How do you encourage your daughter to swing big?
By telling her this, by telling her this all the time, that the world does not care how many times you fall down, only it's just as long as it's one fewer than the number of times you get back up.
Aaron Sorkin, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.